Today we're hiking at Park Point, or is it actually Minnesota Point? And if you cut a channel through the world's longest freshwater sandbar, is that sandbar now an island? What's left of Minnesota's first lighthouse, and how did a brewer turned mayor help change the future of the Twin Ports forever? And how did a famous aircraft manufacturer's father almost ruin it for everyone? This trail packs in the history and the drama in just a few easy miles. Let's go hiking. Park Point has way too much history to fit into just one video. A 1906 amusement park, a massive Works Project Administration or WPA bathhouse from the 1930s that is still there. There were rowing clubs, there were resorts, but today we're gonna focus on two of the wildest stories. The day Duluth dug its own canal, and the day Boeing's father tried to charge everyone a toll for using it. Whew, yeah, this one's crazy. Before we dive into the history, let's go over the Park Point trail stats. Located in Duluth, Minnesota, this 5.2 mile out and back trail is rated easy. There are some stretches where you're going to be walking through some deep sand, but the trail is mostly flat and quite enjoyable. There is also abundant beach access on this trail, which is not typical for most hiking trails, and you have your choice of bay or lake beach access depending on your tolerance for the chilly waters of Lake Superior, but you could easily have an entire beach to yourself here. So, before Duluth was a city, before the lighthouse, before the harbor was engineered, the Ojibwe lived, traveled, and fished along Minnesota Point and Wisconsin Point. The Superior entry, the channel that you're going to reach at the very end, is the very same opening that they've used for generations. This place is part of the Onigamising. Hope I pronounced that correctly, but it means the place of the small portage. A reminder that people have crossed this strip of land for a very, very long time. And when we say very long time, we're talking about hundreds of years of human habitation. They used this land for fishing, for seasonal camp, for travels, and even for burials. On the Wisconsin side, there is a burial ground that dates back to at least the 17th century. I'll be doing an entire episode about Wisconsin Point, and we'll discuss more of that on that episode. So for hundreds of years, this is Ojibwe land, and then comes 1854 and the Treaty of La Pointe. Suddenly, the area opens up to American settlement, and the harbor, of course, becomes the focus. In 1855, Congress appropriated $15,000, or around $558,000 in today's value, for the construction of a lighthouse on Minnesota Point. The lighthouse was first lit in 1858, and it stood around 50 feet tall, and it was lit using what is called a fifth order Fresnel lens. Yes, I know we are currently at the airport. The airport did not exist in the late 1800s, but you're going to see the lighthouse ruins when we get closer to the end of the hike and you get closer to Wisconsin Point, which is where that natural entrance into Superior Bay exists. More on that to come. Also around this time, a town called Middleton was platted along Minnesota Point, eventually merging with several other town sites, forming part of what became the city of Duluth. This is where the story starts to get really interesting as we get into the history of the creation of the Duluth Shipping Canal. First, let me explain the need for a canal. While yes, there is an opening between Minnesota Point and Wisconsin Point, it's not deep enough for the large cargo ships. In fact, you're going to see this when you get to the end of the hike. That's where the hike ends, is at the tip of Minnesota Point, and you're looking across the water at Wisconsin Point. That's the natural opening, but it's not deep enough. So what they tried to do is they tried to build a harbor outside, right? They tried for over a decade, and nature just kept saying nope until they gave up. So in 1865, they tried to build a harbor outside the bay, but a storm destroyed it in 1871. And although it was rebuilt, again, Lake Superior was like, nah, this will not do. And so due to damage from storms and ice, the structure was finally abandoned in 1878. So that's where the natural entrance to Superior Bay stands in the late 1800s. And it was in 1866 that a Lieutenant Colonel W.F. Reynolds of the Bureau of Topographical Engineers, say that a few times fast, he recommended cutting a canal through Minnesota Point. But no projects were ever started by the federal government due to the cost. But the improvement of the Superior side of Superior Bay did continue. And so remember, the aerial lift bridge does not exist and the land is still just connected to the mainland. Again, this is the longest freshwater sandbar in the world. So what does the city of Duluth, Minnesota do? They combined forces with the Lake Superior and Mississippi Railroad to dig the canal on their own. And the local legend is that a local brewer and soon-to-be mayor, Sidney Lucy, gathered up a group of local residents, provided them with equipment like picks, axes, and shovels, and they actually created the first connection between the bay and the lake. By the time the politicians in Superior, Wisconsin had noticed, it was already too late. There were lawsuits and injunctions, but again, it was too late. The Duluth Shipping Canal had been built and is still in use today. The iconic aerial lift bridge that was added in 1905 in order to connect Minnesota Point back to the mainland, and this entire area has been under the control of the Army Corps of Engineers since 1887. With the completion of the Duluth Shipping Canal, we do have a new controversy though. Does Minnesota Point retain its title of the world's longest freshwater sandbar when you include Wisconsin Point? Or is it now an island due to the creation of the Duluth Shipping Canal? The answer is both. It is an island, and it is also still the world's longest freshwater sandbar when you include Wisconsin Point. So just an interesting geographical fact. All right, if the Duluth Canal story wasn't already wild enough, having a brewer turned mayor gather a posse essentially to dig the channel themselves, we have another twist. In 1889, the father of famous aircraft manufacturer William Boeing, a Mr. Wilhelm Boeing, he attempted to charge a toll for use of the canal. Since he owned the property on both sides of the canal, in 1888, he had his attorney stretch a string across the canal entrance and attempted to charge tolls. So nothing came of this first stunt, but later on in that year, in October, he sent notice to several shipping companies saying that a rope would be put in place across the channel on the 15th of October, and he was going to deny passage of all the ships. The tale kind of just ends soon after because he dies only a month later, and it just ends all the talk of the tolls. But it just makes you wonder, did this guy want to be like a real life bridge troll? Was his dream just like being a bridge troll charging tolls in Duluth? But luckily nothing came of it, and we still have the Duluth Shipping Canal today. One thing I really liked about this trail is it pays off from the start with all the beaches and the beautiful forest, but the further and further you get to the end, it gets more narrow, and so you're really getting bay and beach almost in every view. And then that's where you're going to come across the ruins of the lighthouse, and then you're going to come up to Wisconsin Point, and it's just a really great ending to the trail because it really packs it in even more so as you get to all these cool dunes, and like I said, the lighthouse ruins that are very easily accessible, and the end of Minnesota Point where you can see across the water to Wisconsin Point as well. And I may have already said this in the video, but I absolutely loved the ending of this trail. It's so cool with the lake and bay fronts. Plus, you're getting ready to come up on the lighthouse ruins and some of the boathouse ruins. And of course, you get to see across to Wisconsin Point. So yeah, thank you so much if you watched this far. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know where you think I should go hiking next. If you've got any experiences from back in the day at Minnesota Point or Park Point, I love it when people share those stories. It's kind of like a time capsule in a way. If you think about it, we save these comments to sort of have a memory of what this place used to be like. And again, this place has been inhabited for hundreds of years, and I'm sure it'll be inhabited for hundreds more. And here it is, the ruins of the lighthouse that was built in 1858. And that's it. These ruins are all that's left of Minnesota's first lighthouse that marks the original entrance to Superior Bay. But once the new Duluth Shipping Canal took over, this old lighthouse was abandoned, and today this is all that survives. The original tower stood 50 feet and was first lit by whale oil and then later on kerosene. There was a small keeper's house and outbuildings, but those are long gone. I'm sure Lake Superior just swallowed those up. Again, as you walk this 5.2 mile hike, it is very interesting to reflect that humans have been coming here for hundreds and hundreds of years. In fact, we're about to come up to the next ruins. Like I said, it just packs it in. This next ruin is an old boathouse. As you come around the bend on the Park Point Trail, you're going to see this old concrete structure of what is called the Buoy Depot. This was not a clubhouse or a cabin. It was a work building tied to navigation. It was used by U.S. Lighthouse Service and later the Army Corps of Engineers to store buoys and equipment for maintaining the harbor, the lights. Ice and waves and shifting sand has chewed away at parts of the structure. It does sometimes get mixed up with the old Duluth Boat Club. That was a completely different story. The boat club started in 1886, and their first boathouse was actually downtown, right where the Great Lakes Aquarium sits today. Later on, they built a huge boathouse and clubhouse up the point near 10th Street, not down here, right? And it's actually where Duluth became a rowing powerhouse, winning national championships in the 1910s and the early 1920s. So the building you're looking at now is the opposite of that. Not social, not glamorous, just a work depot on the edge of the lake. Crews came out here to store and repair the gear that kept the harbor lit long before LEDs and GPS. It's one of those places, it reminds you of how much history Park Point packs into one small space. You've got the ruins of the first lighthouse, you've got the legendary boat club, and then you've got this just leftover piece of a working shack, and even this, if you can guess what this is. I'm not gonna say, but I think you've got a good idea.
That tree knows things.
And we are almost at the very tip of Minnesota Point, with Wisconsin Point just across the Superior entry. This is the same channel the Ojibwe used for generations, the same entrance the old 1858 lighthouse once guarded, and the same waterway that still carries the big Lakers out to open water. And right on cue, that's the Burns Harbor heading out, a 1,000-foot iron ore carrier built in 1980.
The boats usually like to signal when I get to the end of a trail. It's just like a thing. No way. We're not that close. All right, hold on a second. I'm filming, so.
It's a perfect reminder that this place isn't just dunes and pine forests. It's a living harbor. It's a working lake, and it's a stretch of land that's carried centuries of stories. Thank you so much for hiking with me today at Park Point. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We're going to close out with a little bit of footage of the Burns Harbor heading out, and we'll see everybody on the next trail. Bye-bye.